time. So my name is Brian Teff. I'm the chairperson for the Citizen Advisory Committee, and I call our September 28th meeting to order. And may we please have a roll call for an establishment of quorum.
Sure, thank you. I'll go ahead and call roll. So starting with Miriam Puentes, Susana Martinez,
Here.
Katie Kensock,
Here.
Franklin Hernandez,
Here.
Rachel Inglesgerger,
Here.
Ann Dearborn,
Here.
Veronica Aguayo Ochoa.
She will be joining us a little later, but she will be joining us.
Thank you. Lori Piombo. And Brian Teff.
Here.
So we do have a quorum. We have a quorum established.
Thank you, Director Reddy. Thank you. I was just going to ask Ms. O'Hare to let Veronica in. So there's Veronica. Thank you. Can we go ahead and give the directions on how to access the Spanish interpretation, please, from the interpreters? I believe we have Mr. Francisco and Ms. Julie. So I'm not sure who's giving the introductions.
Hello, yes, that would be me, Francisco. I'll give the directions how to select your language.
Thank you.
Okay. Did someone wanted to give these instructions in English? We can go ahead and interpret them. Or should we do that? We can do that as well too.
Can you do it if you have the written directions in Spanish? If you can go ahead and do it in Spanish.
Okay, I don't have those written, but we've done.
Oh,
these,
okay, I can do. Then I can give you. Okay.
Okay.
So good evening, everyone. If you want to access the Spanish interpretation, there will be a globe that will appear on the bottom right corner of the screen, and you click on that and select Spanish, and you will be able to access the Spanish translation once we switch over the platform.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Queríamos darles las indicaciones de cómo seleccionar su idioma. Vamos a estar teniendo interpretación simultánea. Vayan abajo de sus pantallas si desean escuchar en español. Seleccionen español. No se mantengan en apagado, por favor. Comenzaremos en un momento. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to recognize the Citizens Advisory Committee members that just joined us, Lori Piombo and Veronica Aguayo.
Hi.
And we will move to the Assistant Superintendent. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited about tonight as we will go over some of the results we received from our survey out to our Pueblo Vista, MSLA, Harvest, and River families around our interests that were developed last time. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. We wanted to make sure that we agendize the selection of a name as a recommendation of a name. It's on the agenda. We're hoping to get to that tonight, but if we don't, then we will continue the conversation and discussion at the meeting that's scheduled for October 12th. But we wanted to make sure it was on the agenda in case we got to that tonight. So I just wanted to clarify why it's on the agenda for tonight. But I'm looking forward to hearing all of the conversation and discussion around all of the name recommendations that have come forward. So with that, I'm going to let you guys begin your work and move on into the presentations.
Okay, so we are at the acceptance of the agenda that was emailed out and posted. I'm looking for a motion to accept the agenda.
I motion to.
Go ahead, Franklin.
I motion to accept the agenda.
And a second.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The agenda is accepted. Next is an acceptance of the minutes, emailed and posted. Calling for a motion to accept the minutes.
I motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you.
I second.
Second, Lori Piombo. All those in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No one opposed, the motion carries. So we're into item 2, informational items, the geographical and historical information. Now, Monica, I think that's your presentation, right?
Correct. Thank you, Chairperson Tuff. So moving into this, Nikki, if you could bring up the geography and the historical presentation first. So at our last meeting, while she's bringing that up, there was interest around the geography of the current location of the school and the history associated with that. And so this was sent out to you in advance. We'll give you a few minutes to look through those resources. I just want to thank our local organizations, our Historical Society and our Landmark Society for providing that information for us. And so we'll give, if you could click to the next slide. In the link, there is a link to the geography for the Napa County landmarks. And so if you could bring that up, we'll take a few minutes just to review that and give people some quiet time to read through it. And then we'll move on into the history and take a moment for discussion. So if the committee could take a few minutes to look at those links, review them, and then we'll move on to the next link and review that. And then there'll be some time for discussion. Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate that.
Has everyone had an opportunity to see the webpage? Would anybody like any more time? Monica?
I'd like 1 more minute, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Nikki, if you could stop sharing, we'll go ahead and pause for a moment and see if there are any questions or discussion around the geography or history, this item.
Yeah, I would, has anybody on the committee here or staff been to the campus, and can you tell us a little bit about it? We read about the wonderful restoration and from the county landmarks, right? That's a designation.
So you're asking staff, Chairperson Taft, or are you asking committee in general?
Committee
Again,
in general, if anybody has any personal experience with the site, I would love to hear it. We've just read about it.
So I think one of the pieces that comes up is a restoration of the original building that's there, and that you see featured in that that was awarded by the Historical Society. I don't know if there's any additional items that Dr. Musetti or Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings want to add to that.
No, what it was awarded and recognized for the restoration, like Ms. Reddy had just explained. I think without kind of going into deep discussion, I mean, clearly the campus had a massive full renovation, essentially as a brand new build of a school. However, because of our commitment to that building, because of its history, part of the overhaul of that campus was to do the expansion and the new building with a commitment to the restoration and renovation and preservation of the original old building. And there was a lot of intentionality in the architectural design that led to the new campus that we have now in Salvador.
Thank you. So it's really, it's a wonderful bit of history that we're celebrating with a new chapter, moving into a new program. So as I'm looking at the picture, the name of the school, it says Salvador Union School. That is going to exist as part of the historical landmark moving forward.
Yeah, that would not change. That's part of the preservation. And that's similar to the parallel of, we know that the new school, after it went through the renovation, became River Middle School. And that's currently, we would follow kind of that same marker, is that the parts on the campus where we would put the new name of the Language Academy as we repurpose this campus because of the consolidation and closure plan that we're implementing moving forward for 22-23. Essentially, we would substitute out and replace where it's named River Middle School, where that's visible on the campus. That will be substituted with whatever name this committee renders and ultimately is approved by the school board on the current campus.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions about the information we've just been presented with?
I have a question about the tribes that lived there before Salvador Vallejo arrived. I was reading, and I think I saw the names of 2 different tribes, but I was wondering if we could confirm which one was in this area. Sorry, I didn't get to read the whole article. There was one that said Yolo tribe, and then there was one that said Solano, I think, tribe. Can anyone confirm the tribes that were there, or were they both? I can also repost the meeting and bring it to the next one.
I believe that, I believe both tribes at some point were in that area.
Okay, well, hopefully as we move into discussion, we can talk a little bit about some of the names that have been suggested and how they relate to the historical information and the geographic information that we've been presented with. I'm happy that that was asked for and has been put into the record. The next informational item, if it all is ready to move forward, is input from future students. Alejandra, is this your presentation?
This is my presentation. So if we can queue up the student voice PowerPoint. There we go. All right, thank you. So yes, and once again, thank you so much for this great opportunity to share with you just the student voice that I was able to collect since our last meeting. I have to say that I'm really excited as we're getting closer and closer to making the recommendation for the Middle School Language Academy. And I have to say it's an honor to be part of the process as we're changing history and making history for NVUSD. So yes, between our last meeting and now, I was able to incorporate student voice into our process. And tonight I will share with you our findings. There's 3 different pieces that I'm going to focus on with my presentation. First of all, I'll explain to you our student assignment, what were our students asked to do. And I'll share with you the video that our students got to see. And then I will talk about patterns and trends that came up. And then also I'll end with name suggestions. Our students were able to share some suggestions that I'd like to share with you at the end of the presentation. So we can move on to the next slide. So on Monday, September 20th, our 3rd through 6th grade students at both NBLA and PV were invited to participate in a special assignment involving the Middle School Language Academy. And I was able to create a short video with the help of Chris Reddy to get that assignment rolling out to both of our campuses and each of the individual classrooms. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video. If you haven't had a chance to see it, it's a really short 2-minute video, just giving the students the information needed in order for them to then generate the information that we need. So if you can please play the video, I really appreciate it. We just need to skip the app. There we go. So there should be
You can
audio.
turn your volume on.
Can we get the audio rolling?
Program for you in creating opportunities to shine and share your bilingual skills within our community.
Nikki, can you rewind it? Can you rewind it, Nikki? Thanks.
Hello, NBLA and Pueblo Vista students. My name is Miss Uribe, and I am the principal at NBLA, and I will be the principal at the new dual immersion middle school for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade language learners. I am super excited about building this program for you and creating opportunities to shine and share your bilingual skills within our community. I know this school is going to be awesome. We are doing several things to prepare for the grand opening of the middle school in August 2022. Right now, we are in the process of coming up with the name of the school, and I need your help for this. Here is your task. Are you ready? I invite you all to dream with me. To guide your thinking, I want you to draw a picture of an awesome dual immersion middle school and answer these questions through the drawing and words. What does this middle school look like? What do you learn in this middle school? What makes this school so special? And how do you feel in this middle school? I need you to draw it out with details and to write out keywords around your drawing. Think about words that come to your brain and your heart when you think about the new dual immersion middle school. And if you have recommendations for a name, go ahead and write it on the document. Lastly, make sure to include your name, your school, and grade on the bottom right-hand corner of your paper. You have until Thursday, September 23rd at 12 noon to turn it in. I can't wait to see your drawings, your keywords, and name recommendations. I will take them back to a committee who will make a recommendation for the school name. Estoy muy emocionada y sé que el nombre de esta escuela será increíble y algo de estar orgullosos como una comunidad. Muchas gracias.
Hey teachers, let's do this.
All right, thank you for that. So if we can go back to the PowerPoint presentation, I can move this forward. Thank you. So as you saw, there were several questions that I asked the students to brainstorm. And so the first question is, what does this middle school look like? And so as you can see on the screen, I was only able to highlight a few. You know, we had a lot of students who participated in this process. I didn't count them all, but I would say there's probably anywhere from 400 to 500 individual drawings. So, and the students did an amazing work. So I just wanted to highlight some of the ones that came through. You can see that some students, you know, just worked on the front of the school. What does the front of the school look like? And then you can see that others went into, you know, a little bit more detail where you can see we have basketball courts. We have, you know, an area for the students to play in the back. And that seems to be like the highlight for this particular student. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Here we have more drawings. You know, there's an essence of lockers on the picture to the on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side we have students who actually through the inside of the classroom, you know, where students are in their desks. I'm just, you know, saying this socially distancing, right? Because that's what we're doing these days. So, you know, students had different perspectives, right, as to what their middle school looks like. Moving on to the next slide, please. There were several students, as you can see on the left-hand side, that actually drew fountains. So there's fountains on this campus. The classroom layout is very organized in this picture, as you can see. This particular drawing, they had a flexible outdoor seating available for the students. On the other one, the other picture that's to your left, you can see, you know, welcome. There's a welcome sign. There was a strong sense of making sure the school felt welcome, and it came through in a lot of pictures with just signs that said welcome. Moving on to the next slide. My other question that I asked the students is, what do you learn in this middle school? So these were patterns and trends that came through. So a place to master, and I felt that was really important, that some students captured that word mastered, right? It's not learn, but they're aware that they're part of the dual immersion program and they want to continue to work on their skills, but at this level, they want to master English and Spanish and math. They're learning about social studies, that came through also. The history of many people, including the Native Americans. Science, visual and performing arts. Coding was also a very strong component that we saw in the pictures. Cooking classes, gardening also came up. Learning how to play an instrument, learning how to run a business, and then STEM with a strong focus on engineering also came through. Moving on to the next slide. What makes the school so special, right? Or what will make the school so special? Sports came through as being something that is very strong at this campus. A variety of clubs. I didn't see anything in there in terms of like specific clubs, but there was a lot of students that mentioned clubs and an opportunity to participate in those clubs to then, you know, provide a voice for just different areas of interest. A buddy bench to include all. This was something that came up a couple times. So a buddy bench meaning that there's a bench that's designated for students who may not feel like they're connected that day. And so just having this bench so that other students can see, oh, well, that student needs needs a little extra TLC. Let's go see how we can incorporate them back into the playground or, you know, whatever the situation may be. Positive words written on the walls. Everyone feels loved. Lots of plants around the school also came through. Gender neutral bathrooms are available. A dance team. No uniform was something that came very strong in a lot of pictures, and there were even a few that said no uniforms, please. So that was something that came through also. Flexibility to have outdoor classes. Many schools are combined into one, so students are aware that we have some schools that are closing, and so the school will be special because we're combining a lot of those schools into one. This school is awesome and prestigious, and it feels like home. It was also captured in the drawings. Next slide, please. And these were actual quotes that I lifted from the drawings that came through. How do you feel in this middle school? A lot of students didn't fill out this part, but I was able to capture a few that were pretty similar across the board. So I feel awesome. I feel safe and happy. I feel included. I feel united. And the school feels safe and accepted. Next slide, please. In terms of name suggestions, I had to look through all of them, and I have to say that I have Anne and Franklin, who are in this committee, help me look through the documents too, because we did have a lot. And so I just want to take this moment to thank them too, because there's a lot of work to look through. So we were able to just capture some of the names that came up a lot between both schools. And then we were able to weed out, there were a few, believe it or not, that wanted the name to be Uribe Academy. And so we did not include that in this list. So there's a few that we didn't include. So the name suggestions that came up, if you can go to the next slide.
Principal Uribe, you can't just gloss over that. That's really sweet.
I thought so too. I'm gonna frame those two somewhere in my office. Uribe Academy.
It was, and it was more than two.
She's like casually glossing over that. That's really sweet.
There was Miss
I thought
Uribe's
so.
Academy. There was the Uribes with plural. So
Right.
it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to intervene and interrupt.
It's okay. Yeah, it was fun. So these were the names that surfaced as we looked through all of those documents. So Dreamers Middle School, Dream Academy of Napa Valley, and there was actually several students who moved this one forward from both PD and NBLA. And I pulled, you could see a picture here from one of the students who advanced this recommendation or suggestion. This student actually had an acronym for DREAM. So it was dedicated, responsible, empathetic, awesome, and magical. Sakura Middle School, which has a reference to cherry blossoms, Sakura. Wine Valley Middle School, Grapevine Middle School, Todos Juntos Middle School, so all united, that's what Todos Juntos means. United Language Academy, or ULA. Unidos, which is also United Language Academy. Heart of the Valley came through, and also Corazón del Valle Language Academy. Star Middle School, Valley View Language Academy, and Napa International Spanish Academy. So those are all just amazing names, right? They just feel like they have so much just power and charge behind those words. So that is my presentation, and I just want to thank our students who put in a lot of thought into their drawings, a lot of thought into their words, and I'm just really proud of the work that they did for both schools, for both Pueblo Vista and NBLA, and also to our teachers, right, who carved out some time, some instructional time for our students to just dedicate some time into their learning, right? Getting them to think about this before they put their thoughts on paper. And so to our committee, I just hope you feel inspired, right, with the work that came from our students as we get closer and closer for a recommendation for our name. So thank you. And that's my presentation.
Thank you for involving the students. That's excellent. And
You're welcome.
the community survey input.
Do we want to pause for discussion around this item, or do we want to hold off until we look at the community? Any further comments about it or questions before I move forward?
Let's move forward.
Okay. If you could put up the last presentation around the community input. Thank you, Principal Uribe, again, for taking the time. I just have to acknowledge she's running a school, doing an amazing job running a school while also going through this design process and incorporating student voice. So great work. So thanks for that.
That's why they want to name a school after her.
So it's always hard to follow the students, but we're going to do that. So as a part of this process, you all asked staff to get community interest. So tonight's third presentation is around the interest that came from our communities that are incorporated into this middle school language academy. So if you could turn next slide, please. So I want to review how we came to the survey itself by going through what we designed at the last meeting. So the guiding principles around the development of this survey were really connected to our board policy around renaming, and those 4 guiding principles around the geographical area, the individuals living or deceased who have made contributions, those who have outstanding contributions locally or within the state, and then making sure that it's not so similar to another name. So that's one of the guiding principles that that we need to consider as we look tonight. Next slide, please. And then the school mission and vision. And so that focus on global education that instills a love of learning and honors languages and cultures. And then the vision that is focused on, and we have the right principle in place, she's already empowering students. So a vision that all students are empowered to achieve academic excellence while growing bilingualism, biliteracy, and interpersonal connections in a community that is responsive to the well-being of all learners. I think our students are already starting to capture and live out that vision in some of the pictures that we saw tonight. So next slide, please. Our driving question that led us to some of the interests that you'll see on the survey that was sent out was around when considering these 2 guiding principles of the board policy and the mission and vision and making a name recommendation for the new middle school, what are the interests and considerations? So to recap our interests, if you could hit to the next slide, please. The interests and considerations that we included on the survey that were generated by this committee on the 14th were the following, and you'll see these exactly highlighted on the survey and the priorities that will reflect tonight as we look at the results. But those in particular were the following. They reflect the bilingualism and biliteracy, the importance of that, emphasizing the global citizenship, capturing that we're including multiple schools merging into one community, lifting up marginalized voices, naming it after a figure who represents languages and cultures, reflects the geography, emphasizes leadership, includes Spanish words in the name, and of course, Chairperson Teff, it's on a t-shirt, and trying to avoid controversial names in history. And so taking those interests, you'll see those captured on the survey. Next slide, please. So at the last meeting, some of the names that were generated, just as a review before moving on, I'll give you a moment to look at that list as we read through them. These were some of the names generated by the committee. We did not put these names on the survey, but did ask, and you'll see some recommendations of names from our community as we sought input. So some of the names that were generated last time appear here in alignment with the interest in our discussion. Next slide, please. So our community input, the process that we went through, if you could move to the next slide, please, Nikki. And then if you click on that survey on the graphic, the survey will actually pop up. So this was sent out to our communities of Napa Valley Language Academy, Pueblo Vista, Harvest Magnet, and River Middle School. It was open to current students or students that are potentially enrolling in the future, with the exclusion of 8th grade, who will not be a part of the Middle School Language Academy. If you could scroll down a little bit, please. The survey asked that they could prioritize and give value to the interests that were developed by this committee. So you'll see the interests that I reviewed tonight and the slides are also the interests that they ranked, and we'll provide those results to you tonight. And this was sent out in both English and Spanish. And then last but certainly not least, if you could scroll all the way down, Per the request of the committee from last time, we did ask for name suggestions and asked that they included how those name suggestions align to the interests or considerations generated by the committee. Thank you, Nikki. If you could go back to the presentation. And next slide, please. So the results from our survey. We did have about 114 responses to the English survey. We had low responses to our Spanish survey. We had about 12 responses after sending those out a couple of times. You'll see that most of the responses that were generated were students that are closer to middle school, so our students and families or staff, this was also sent to, who are in the upper grades in both English and Spanish. Next slide, please. And our participants, this is where you'll see that about the grade levels, where you have mostly our upper grade levels. If you could go back for a minute, Nikki, I missed something on the last slide, thanks. You'll see that there was for our English participants, a good mix of the different schools and the majority of our River and Harvest students from our Spanish survey. Thank you, Nikki. Next slide, please. So with that, I want to make sure that we capture the way that the survey results came about was that the highest ranking priority was a 1. So when you capture that with the data, that means the lowest total is actually the priority. And so that's why you'll see that 1 there under reflects the importance of bilingualism and biliteracy. So those top 3 choices are highlighted in blue. So if it did not have as high of a priority, people would have ranked it a 9. And so when you total that, the total becomes higher. So you have to look at this in reverse. So you'll see, if you could click to the next slide, please, for our Spanish results, our top 3 interests from our community, from the interests that were generated by this committee, were the first one being that the name reflects the importance of bilingualism, biliteracy. Second, that it emphasizes global citizenship. And third, that it's inclusive of schools merging into one community. Next slide, please. Similarly, our English responses, again, noting that the lowest total is actually the highest priority. And so you'll see that in the 3 on the left that are highlighted in blue. And we articulated those in the next slide for our English responses. So similarly, you'll see that our English community interests are similar to our Spanish community interests, although noting that there was a difference in the amount of participants. The first reflects the importance of bilingualism, biliteracy. Second, it emphasizes global citizenship. And third, it's inclusive of schools merging into one community. Next slide, please. So there were some name suggestions, and what we did was similar to the process that Principal Uribe went through, looking at the name trends, and then also looking at some of those descriptions which came up in our last conversation as a committee around the ending of that particular name. So you'll see some of the trends that came about that align to the interests, naming it after particular people, having those names in Spanish, so it's Cesar Chavez, Corazon de Valles, Corazon Bilingües, Dolores Huerta, La Viña, and they even had an acronym that went along with that. Napa Valley, Rio, Salvador, Sylvia Mendez, Vine and Vineyard, Viñedo, Voices, and Wapo. And then looking at some of those namings that were trends that came up repeatedly, you'll see those on the right. So some of these were mixed. It could be Language Academy or Bilingual Language Academy, but these were some of the key terms that came up as descriptors of the school. Next slide, please. So with that, we'll pause and we can take discussion unless you want to move us into the next part, which is discussion around possible name recommendations, but I can take some questions around the community survey before we do that.
Yeah, let's pause here. Any questions about the survey from the committee to staff?
You said 12 families were Spanish speakers. How many were English? I didn't catch that if you said.
We had 114 responses from our English.
Wow. Okay.
As I was looking at the survey, were the 1, 2, and 3. So there's uniformity between the 2 different versions of the survey that went out. Were choices 1, 2, and 3 also selections 1, 2, and 3? Is there any survey bias for just, the first one got number one?
I can't speak to how people responded. They did show up in a chart, and you could only respond once to each one of them. They were the first three in those charts.
Okay. All right, well, let's go to discussion.
Chairperson Teft, we've been advised to ask for public comment on each of the items on the agenda before we move to the next. So if there is any public comment.
Okay, so at this time, I'm calling for public comment on the information. So at this time, members of the public may address the committee regarding a matter of public interest on the agenda. No action will be taken on the comments of the agenda item unless specifically authorized by law. If the speaker wishes to address the committee on an item on the agenda, time will be provided before that item. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there anybody waiting for public comment?
There is no public comment at this time.
Just to be clear, that would be anyone can raise their hand. So anybody who wants to contribute. So raise your hand for participants in the public would be the mechanism for public comment. We see any, Nikki?
No, I do not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're moving into the discussion item. So this is an open discussion of the information that we've just heard, the informational items plus the name list that we have generated. Does anybody would like to start off? I do have a couple of questions that I'd like to put out there. So I'll start. One thing that I believe is important is we haven't up till this time talked about what the outcome of this committee will be. We've talked about it, being a name recommendation. I think we need some agreement on what that will be. It is our intention to suggest a single name or a slate of names. Is there a strong opinion one way or the other? I'm asking the committee, and I would like input, please.
I would like to suggest one name because I think I think if we bring several names to the board, then it would be up to the board, and I think that sort of would create another sort of process. And I think I sort of look at my task here on the committee to come up with a name recommendation, not names given to the board so that they can choose. That's sort of and I know that the board would have to approve that name, but I think it would just be more powerful if we have one. That would be my recommendation.
I agree. If we could all agree, then I think that would be the best way to go. Absolutely. I feel like you're right, Franklin. Our job is to come up with, what we think so the board can either approve it or not. And good thoughts there.
Chair Teef, I want to appreciate you asking that question for clarity. I think it's a great question. And I want to thank Lori and Franklin for their input as committee members. I'll just say from the kind of staff perspective, I would echo their sentiment. I think that you all conducting the in-depth work, I think that the spirit and the intent would be after you study the issue, engage in discussion, study the issue in depth, right? That the board would appreciate, a focused advisory recommendation that they consider for action, either vis-a-vis an approval or a rejection.
Okay, so if there is unity in the name, our intention is to suggest a single name and recommend a single name. If we cannot come to that, we will make that known. How might we come to consensus on a name? We at this point don't have a mechanism for that.
Could we share some more names, like ones from the list that we liked, or from other lists, and then ones that we've kind of been inspired by the lists? Would that be a good time to do this, or just more discussion?
Yeah, I think that's where we are now. And,
Yeah.
you know, as part of this, this will be the bulk of our meeting here really is looking at the names that have been suggested, adding names to that list. I think that we need to go through the students and the community input and take what we've seen there and officially add them to our list of considerations.
I have a question too, a clarification. So it seems like that reflecting the importance of biliteracy seems to be the number one. I want to ask what you guys think that looks like. Does that mean having the name maybe in English and Spanish, or you know, because that seems to be the biggest one. I just was wondering what you guys think about how you reflect that in a name. Is it because it could be bilingual, or does it need to have the immersion or biliteracy in it? That's my question.
Are you asking that to the committee or to the staff?
Yeah, just other members. If anybody wants to chime in, what do you guys think it means? That would be helpful too. I think if we're trying to keep, you know, yes, it's our decision, but we definitely want input from, you know, the community. We've asked for it, and that seems to be a number one thing. So it's just a question. If anybody wants to tell me their opinion, but you know, I just curious what you guys think.
Do you mean, Lori, like if it's not a Spanish name, if it has dual language academy or dual language school, is that enough?
Is that enough or enough? We have it in English / in Spanish. Is that enough? What does that look like? I mean, it's, you know, it reflects the importance of biliteracy. So does that,
and that would help us narrow down our list also.
That's what I think too. And
if
maybe
we can decide on that.
Yeah. And maybe it's something we'll come, you know, figure out as we go. But I just was wondering if anybody had any definite thoughts on it.
What I thought about, I was thinking about the same thing, about whether this is just kind of my idea. My thought is that if we sort of look towards supporting a name that is in Spanish specifically, then it could be, you know, middle school. So if it's a Spanish with the middle school, if it's a name that we move forward, that it's in English, that still represents the ideas of globalism or language, then we would have that English name with Language Academy after it. That's sort of where I kind of land on. I think doing that kind of supports, I think either one of those two sort of directions that we move in could support that you know, that interest that I think the community and the students, and I think even us, have.
And then I'll kind of add to the question that Lori posed, which is, so then given what Franklin just shared, if it's a person that represents bilingualism and biliteracy, or the importance of that, then would we want to also include dual immersion middle school or just middle school? And I'm just posing that it's a one.
I gained some information or some confidence in this process looking at the survey results. We can have as long a name as we want. And also that we did ask specifically, is it very important that there be a Spanish word in the name? And that didn't rank in the top. So as far as does the name have to have a translatable or a Spanish word in it, I don't think that we have to do that. The community has not requested that by survey.
Can I put a pragmatic constraint kind of into the consideration? Because I think this is, you're all developing as committee members, a great framework, a workable framework. But I do just want to say from a logistical standpoint, like a pragmatic logistical, filing the name with the California Department of Education, for example, et cetera. I think there is a risk with some of the backslash considerations. So just having like the English version translated into a Spanish version backslash, as we saw through some of the examples, could cause confusion for some of the educational bureaucracy that we need to deal with. And then I also just think of like the implications of signage and marketing could become challenging as well, but primarily just running the risk of confusion as the school has to kind of work through the accountability systems, if we have it like literally translated and backslash, I think that might be a constraint we want to kind of think about, that could cause operational issues in, just navigating the logistics of, engaging with the California Department of Education, things we need to file, et cetera, could cause potential confusion. Which it sounds like the framework you're talking about is moving away from that, but I just kind of wanted to put that out as an explicit constraint to consider.
So I think let's maybe park the idea on, how do we make a determination of recommendation after we perhaps put more names on that list. So moving.
Sorry, just a suggestion as you were talking about process for consensus. I just want to remind us that as we generated some of those interests and look at names, that those can serve as sort of like does this name meet the interests that were then ranked? And so as you look at adding those names, making sure we're grounding back in some of those interests.
Thank you. And then just a general discussion of what we saw there. And Monica, I have a question, and I have a question to the staff here is, what is the difference between a DLI program, dual language immersion program, and a language academy? Those have come up often. Matter of fact, on every one of the suggestions, it's either a language academy or a dual language immersion. So what is the difference? Or what is the similarity, perhaps, is a better question.
I think I'll speak specifically to how we're speaking about the program at the school itself, and that looking at the program, the core program is our students immersed in a bilingual biliteracy program, so a dual immersion program, knowing that we will have a portion of our students in this transition who are incorporated in the language and culture aspect of the school, who are non-DLI students. And so really flipping that percentage from what it is now in the middle school model to the majority core program of the school. I don't know if other staff want to add to that.
I would elaborate on what Monica said. So the dual language immersion will be that, like she said, the majority of students at the school, but we have to remember we want to maximize the facility, the experience of the school, and get it to as full capacity as possible, which would mean that students, and I've said it a lot of times, the non-DLI students, but I want to shift our language to a different kind of nomenclature. This would be students that are starting their second language, and that even that doesn't work. So I kind of have to flush it out as I think about it, because we have English learners who actually might have a second language at home and come to the sixth grade experience not being in DLI, but actually already being bilingual and bicultural, just because of their home experience coupled with their school experience. So these would be students. The smaller number of students would be students who, and families who are opting into the school in order to kick off their formal study of a second language in an educational environment, the school. And they're not technically kids in a dual language immersion program, I think, as typically defined in the educational field, which starts at kindergarten. So there is, I think, a little bit of a limitation when you call it just DLI, knowing that we're going to expand to a broader base of families who now want to kind of, formally join language immersion and culture education just at a later phase in their students' educational journey. And I think language academy, or I don't know, Franklin, you said middle school. I can't remember what you said, but I think it's important to say what I say in juxtaposition of what you said. But I think Language Academy provides a broader umbrella where those students that are starting later in their educational journey are included in the title of the school.
That's clear, but the dual language immersion program will exist through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Absolutely. And will be the majority. That'll be the majority, and it'll be the driver's seat programmatically. It'll be in the driver's seat, just like Director Reddy said before, when it was in the larger comprehensive middle school, there was the larger comprehensive middle school is the driver programmatically, with dual immersion strand being nested within that broader comprehensive experience. It's flipped in this environment, right? Dual language immersion, the dual language program is the driver, right? And then everything programmatically falls behind that. However, there are kids at this school, in this school setting, that didn't come through the formal K-5 dual immersion experience. So we want to be mindful of inclusivity so that they don't feel, so we don't contribute to this concept of DLI and non-DLI, right? Like we don't want to create that kind of an environment.
Thank you for the information. Well, I think we should go to Monica. Perhaps we can put the screen up, the Google Doc that you'd been collecting names on, and it would be really nice if we were in a room and we had, because we can't see that doc and the presentation from the students, but I think people have it perhaps in their own technology there. I'd like to add some names to that list. So just for my own clarity of what I'm putting up is the names from our September 14th meeting, and then the addition of the names that were generated by students and community that were presented tonight, or the opportunity to add to those, so just the list from last week. Could you clarify for me? My idea would be to add names to that list rather than just taking the names that have been given to us. Okay.
Brian, can I jump in and provide a comment as that list is being pulled up? I have printed out all the PowerPoints, and I'm trying to draw some comparisons in the names from the community, the students, and our committee. So I just wanted to note kind of what I have seen as that's the same is on all lists is the Corazón del Valle and Academy, the use of Academy. But something that did draw to me on the community suggestions is voices. So voices. So as a name trend, I saw that come through, and I feel that could be pretty powerful if it's Voices United, so Voices Unidos or something to that effect. But I mean, that word wasn't on all the lists, but that's just something that stuck out to me this time around.
One thing that became apparent to me is our list from the last time we met. We didn't complete the names. I'll use one that I suggested, which was Springwood Middle School. Like we just kind of put out names. We didn't put the rest of it on. Shall we do that now?
I believe that this sort of was intentional, like to have those sort of maybe two separate conversations. One is like the actual, like the name, and then what sort of the descriptive language around language academy, middle school, and having maybe a separate conversation around that.
I think maybe just going back to the interest of adding some of the names to the list from those that were from the community or the students that align to the interests here as a starting point, and then we can narrow from there. If that's agreeable to the group. And what I'll do is as trends come up, as was just mentioned, I'll highlight those if they're already up here, so that those stand out.
I'd like to add a name given input from the community in the survey. And it's the very last one actually in the name trends, WAPO. And then I confirmed on Native Land California that the website that land that Salvador is on was part of the WAPO tribe land.
I'd like to add Napa Valley from the community suggestions.
I like to add Todos Juntos. It was Todos Juntos Middle School.
I would really like to add United Language Academy, or ULA, or Unidos Middle School. And for me, I just wanted to just share why the United Language Academy or the Unidos Middle School was something I was really drawn to, is because of one of my students was one of the students who did one of the pictures where he wrote ULA. And then when we're talking about it, and it was, for him, it was really simple. And he just said, and I think on it, I know Mrs. Uribe had it on there, that he just wrote, it's a place for students where they feel together. It's just about, and he just said, well, Mr. H, it's, it's where everyone can go be together, like it's going to be, there are two schools that are kind of being closed, and it's a place where everyone can kind of be united and together. So I liked that sort of his thoughts around it. And so that's why those two, I feel I feel a connection because of my conversation with my student.
And just for clarity for the committee, the ones we're adding, I'll put in blue, so we have a way to differentiate between what was generated at the previous meeting and what's being added.
Combining
I'd like to.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay, Katie.
Well, I was just inspired by a lot of the names and kind of thinking about putting some of them together and combining with a lot of the things we've talked about, especially biliteracy, global community, and one that I came up with, Un Valle Global Language Academy, or going off of what Franklin was saying, Un Valle Unido Language Academy. I would love the idea of including something that relates to Napa as a community, because we're in a very unique situation where we do live in this beautiful valley. It's a little nest, and it brings us together from two different schools to study two languages.
I'd like to add Napa to that list. So not Napa Valley, but Napa.
Do you want me to edit out the valley in the original one? Did I miscapture that?
No, I think both are appropriate. They are distinct.
Just given everything I'm hearing about Voces, Valle, hearing student input about mastery and prestigious schooling, I was wondering if we could put as an option Voces del Valle Leadership Academy.
I also had the Voces del Valle on my list, so I like that one. And can we add Voces Unidos as well?
Did you want a similar ending, the Leadership Academy, or just a standalone as Voices Unidas?
I like Language Academy.
I was going to say, I think it would sound good with Language Academy.
And then I think for Voces del Valle, I think would be Del, but correct me if I'm wrong. DEL. Thank you.
Are there name suggestions?
Was Voces del Valle leadership, not language, right? I didn't hear that. It's specifically Rachel leadership, correct?
It could be language or leadership, but I was just thinking leadership because of the focus on mastery and
got it. Okay.
Yeah, bilingualism.
Got it. Sorry.
I think we should talk about that other bit, right? All the other names that go onto it. Middle School Language Academy. Pat, you had talked about that earlier in the meeting about how those are different. We're talking about a name and then sort of a functional descriptions. Could you elaborate?
Yes, I think that how it ends could be a separate conversation. So as we, because I think that there might be some interest in maybe it go around whether it's a language academy, leadership academy, middle school, like we would need some like maybe some consensus or vote around that. But the like core name is probably what needs to be decided, and then the other part separately. Unless there's something that comes together so beautifully that people want the whole name. So is that kind of where you were going? Is like the whole name as a selection?
Yeah, what I was thinking is there might be less options in that conversation. So as I've heard the conversation, I believe it will be Middle School Language Academy, or it will be name Dual Language Immersion Middle School, or it will be Leadership Academy Middle School. I mean, we have less choices.
Yeah.
And maybe we could just capture those in writing and we could see them, and then we would have a very easier time with that. And those would be appended to everything on this name's suggestion.
Exactly. Yes, and I do think that the core name is probably where we want to just hear from everyone around preferences around that, and then the discussion around the other part. Or I think what are you saying that you want to go through and add the tail of the name and then have the conversation based on that?
My interest would be understanding the options for the tail of the name.
That's a new nomenclature, the tail of the school name.
There's a better word for it.
I know there is.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what Franklin was saying earlier, right? That I personally think that if we come up with the first part of the name, then we can have conversations on how we're going to end it, right? Because if we're going to have a Spanish name, we might not need to put Language Academy at the end. We might just go with Leadership Academy, right? Or we might just go with middle school. So I think two things. I mean, this list is great. I mean, there's a lot of excitement around the names. I think that we should focus on the first part of the name, and then I have a feeling that we'll just organically know and kind of have conversations on how we would end the name of the school. And then the second part to this, I don't know if we're in a place where we can start, we just added some names, but are we in a place where we can start eliminating some names so that we can shorten the list and really advance those names that we feel really align to the interests that we talked about in that first meeting. So those were my two things, like really focus on the beginning of the name and then are we in a place to start eliminating?
What I can do with that is I can just strike through names that we feel like don't meet those interests or weren't of high priority as we go through that.
I also want to just make sure that we hear from everyone on the committee about names that maybe that kind of stand out for them, just to make sure that we're hearing all the voices on the committee.
Brian, I have a question. Are we going to be like, I mean, do you kind of see this like where, you know, we all maybe pick our top 5 or something and then whittle it down? Or I mean, I'm not sure how, you know, we're going to get down to a certain amount, or I'm just wondering your thoughts. And on a second note, I have tickets to go see Van Morrison, so I have to go soon, but I'm going to be listening all the way till I get down there. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, you know, that's actually a good time check, right? We have limited amount of time today, and we have one meeting reserved after this, and then the recommendation is to go to the board that week after. So we have our work cut out for us in the next 45 minutes. I believe that we will find maybe what we think are the top 5 tonight. Hopefully we can get down to even less, and then perhaps think on it for a period of time and then come back with a recommendation. That's how I expect that we'll go through this. So we now we're still growing this list, and in short order we will take some names off the list.
All right, well, I'm going to be listening. I'm going to ask if I could, my top 5, maybe text to Alejandra. I have a couple things written down, but I don't think I'll be available after 7:30.
I think we're ready for that now. If you would like to call them out, we can highlight them as a committee member favorite.
It's not on this list, but it was on, I think, a student list, or maybe it is the Corazon del Valle. I really like that one. Corazon del Valle.
It's already, it's highlighted there.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Sorry. Okay, yeah. That's definitely a favorite for me. And I do like the voices. How do you say that? Voces de Valle Leadership Academy or Language Academy. Unidos Middle School or United Language Academy. I like those. And Valley Vista was one, and I don't know if that's on there. I remember it from somewhere, but anyway, I'll stop at 5 there. I think that was 5. Thank you. I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, thank you for your support and input.
Thank you.
So I think prior to that, just process check, I think some things that came up from the committee were around hearing from everybody first, and then maybe going through and reducing the list. And for her top choices, I just put stars there as not to confuse with the highlighting that was done previously to demonstrate the trends that came about.
Director Reddy, for process, will you just star as other committees? Just star, and multiple stars will be the indicator of what got most choice?
Definitely, thanks.
Okay, so through Zoom, it's a little bit hard to confirm that everybody has had an opportunity to speak. To go sort of around the committee. Perhaps I just go around the gallery as I see it. Ann Dearborn, do you feel like you've had an opportunity to put names on the list?
I do, yes. Thank you. I feel like our next step would be to start eliminating, dwindling down, dwindle the list down.
Okay, I have the names that have come to me are on the list. Franklin,
They are on the list for me.
and I'm just going to go in my gallery order here. Monica, do you have any names that you would like to see on that list?
I'm going to abstain from that recommendation and just thank you for navigating on Zoom and for the names that have been brought forward from the group.
Okay, so as I don't necessarily have clear definition between staff and committee member here, I'm just going to go through my Zoom gallery order. Alejandra Uribe.
Same as Monica. I'm happy with the list, but I'm not going to add any more.
Catherine Kensock.
I'm happy with the list and I'm ready to move forward with some selections of our top ones. I feel like, personally, I feel like it's a little harsh to eliminate. So I really like the idea of just putting like stars next to it.
Okay.
I second that. I agree.
Okay, Pat, I would like to go around the Zoom gallery. Do you have any comments on a name here in
Well,
the
thank
list?
you. No, thank you so much. The list is amazing, and I'm looking forward to the next step. So, thank you.
Susie Martinez.
Nothing additional to add.
Rachel Engeskirger.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Dr. Rosanna Musetti, you're on my Zoom gallery. Do you have any comments on the list?
No, I think we've got a great list to work with, and I look forward to seeing stars and see which ones get the most stars for consideration.
Then I have the interpreters, and I have Veronica presented. Veronica, you have any comment on the list?
I am happy with the list and I'm ready to star up.
Okay, all committee members have had input to our list. So we can kind of move forward, and there's been a request to not necessarily remove, but rather star. We're into process here.
So I think this is a good time, as Lori shared her top 5. I think we could go around and maybe have everyone share their top 5.
Would it be possible to zoom out just a little bit so that we can see the entire list and then maybe take 1 minute to kind of organize our top 5?
Absolutely.
I'm also wondering, I don't know if Lori hit 5 total. Is 5 from everyone on the committee too many, just as a process check? Should it be maybe top 3 to kind of dwindle down to a more concentrated number? That would be my potential suggestion, of course, for the committee to consider. Just a suggestion. Because I think Lori even struggled with naming 5.
And there are some crossover names like Unidos and United. So yes, I think 3 would be a good place to start as the committee's in agreement.
Yeah, okay, so it's just free form. You want to volunteer yourself and pick? Now's the opportunity.
I'll go first. This is Susie. So top 3, Todos Juntos, Corazón del Valle, and Un Valle Unido.
Did I capture those 3 correctly? I'm going to check after each one just to make sure.
I'll check your work, Ms. Reddy.
Okay, thank you.
While you're doing that, yeah, you were good there. You captured Ms. Martinez's 3.
Okay, I guess I will go. So I would, my 3 would be the United Language Academy, Unidos Middle School, and Un Valle Lindo, Un Valle Unido Language Academy.
I can go. Un Valle Unido Language Academy. Voces del Valle. And Unidos Middle School.
My selections would be, or are, Napa Valley and Napa with the middle school language academy added to them. And United Language Academy, although I'm concerned of confusion with the local football team, Napa United. Which does have a big presence in the youth community.
It really does.
I can share my top 3. Voces del Valle Leadership Academy, Corazón del Valle, and Silvia Mendez.
Okay, are you ready to mark another one?
I'll go. So Corazón del Valle. United Language Academy. Forgive my children in the background. And Voces del Valle Language Academy. Or I'm sorry, Leadership Academy. Yes.
Okay, Corazón del Valle. United Language Academy. Although I now have the same concern as Brian. And Voces Unidos Language Academy.
I'd like to chime in too. Corazón del Valle. I really like that one. Voces del Valle Leadership Academy and Voces Unidos.
I hate to interrupt, but it's bedtime for my kids, so I'm going to be logging off. But so thank you for tonight. I really enjoy the input in the meeting. I hope everyone has a really great night. Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Can I say something that might be logistical? My husband just pointed out that voces is feminine, and so would it be Voces Unidas?
It's a beautiful moment when your former student becomes your student, or you become your student of your former student. Thank you, Katie.
Okay.
That's NVUSD.
That's my husband is always correcting my Spanish, actually, but also NVSD, yay.
We've gone through the process of starring here.
I do have one question. A couple times I noticed as we were starring the Voices de Valle and Voices Unidas that people often put in language. And so I wasn't clear if there's an interest in language and leadership, or if that needs to be explored at all in any of those options. Just an observation.
Well, we're in a discussion phase, so I'll give my opinion here is that Leadership Academy is, I don't believe that it goes to one of our, what we're seeing through the survey. It doesn't speak to the bilingualism, biliteracy. If anybody feels strongly about Voces del Valle, Language Academy has a better opportunity of becoming the name of the school than Voces del Valle Leadership Academy, I think now would be the time to put that on the list.
I agree. I think Language Academy is probably more appropriate if we're trying to draw other students in for the language.
I agree. I think that the Language Academy, I think that I was one of the ones who said Language Academy speaks more to what the mission is for the school.
Do we want to see, just kind of do like which, so if we look at the front end, speaking to kind of what's been brought up by multiple members, like, do we want to just pick, like, based on the counts, deal with the front end top choices and then move to discussion around the tail?
Yes. Please.
Flushing out the tail. So if I count here, I think Miss Reddy had to step away for one brief moment. Oh, there she is. Okay. So let's do some counting here. It looks like Corazón del Valle got 1, 2, 3, is that 6 there? Thank you.
Yes, I have it bigger on my screen so I can.
Okay, thank you.
United Language Academy has 5. So I'm reading the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the top 6 ones. Unidos Middle School has 2. Valle Unidos Language Academy has 3. I'm going to say that. Voces de Valle Leadership Academy.
Voces del Valle.
Voces de Valle has 5, and Voces Unidas Leadership Academy has 2. I think, is that correct?
Yeah, I think you got it.
No.
Corazón del Valle is 6. Yeah, okay. So essentially the top is Corazón, the next, the remaining, the tied are
United Language Academy.
United, and Voces del Valle.
Voces del Valle.
So to be clear, this is not the ranked vote. This is the opportunity to be put up against the guiding principles.
Correct.
And thank you very much for bringing us back to what we decided, what the considerations are.
I think checking these against the guiding principles would be a great next step. Maybe Monica, just for a visual scaffold, can you bold the front end of the names, which is what we're dealing with right now? So like bold Corazón del Valle, bold United.
I'm also going to move them up so we can look at them directly across.
That's helpful.
So give me just a minute.
Okay, great.
we appreciate everyone's patience as we work on this document together. But no.
Need to move Unidos. Was there an interest in moving Unidos Middle School up there as well? With this too?
Yeah, I think just put it on the bottom, right? Because it got 2 votes. So everything that got a vote at this point, I think just working with clarity.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only interest in that would be if we find that there is a real concern or conflict with the United soccer team. And we wanted to go with Unidos maybe instead of United.
And Anne and Brian, I think it's I said it already, but I'm so appreciative that our chair chief brought it up, because I think it is something to tune into as a detail. It is huge in the community.
And I also agree. I mean, I think in thinking about it as well, and I think for consideration, maybe Unidos Language Academy, because then that would, or Unidos Middle School, as a thought, for those of you who vote. I mean, I would feel comfortable enough reconsidering that vote. But no, I couldn't, because I voted for Unidos Middle School as well. But sort of maybe if this becomes one of the top 3 for us to talk about the language around it, like do we use Unidos Language Academy? Do we use Unidos Middle School? So I just wanted to sort of voice that consideration as well, because I think that would definitely be a concern.
Okay, I think we're done sorting.
Is the Corazón del Valle in black versus blue for, is there something special about it? Can you remind me?
No, there's nothing special about it.
Okay, I couldn't remember if there was something special as to why it was marked in a different color. Okay.
Thank you. Oh, wrong button. There we go.
So with that sort, I think we've effectively shortened our list.
I think I'm also going to highlight the priorities that came forth from the community on the left-hand side for the interest. Would that be helpful? The top 3 that were highlighted from our community.
Yes, please.
I just want to highlight that some of these are repetitive, and so as we move to that survey, we combine some of them. So it'll take me a minute.
So those are the 3 that are now highlighted.
So the 3 that are highlighted are the ones that came through in both the English and the Spanish as priority interests. And so bringing those out to the forefront, I think, and I think I heard as we were sorting these, just the next step around looking at these versus the interest. Is that correct?
Yes. Do any of these names that are now in blue not align with the board policy, or are all of them acceptable? So this would be an individual who's made an outstanding contribution, a geographic area, or not so similar to an existing school.
Does the Napa Valley and the Napa one sound too much like NVLA?
My opinion is no. And it also does not, I don't think that Napa Middle School would be confused with Napa High School either, or Napa Valley Unified School District. But that's something that I'm comfortable with.
I agree that they wouldn't be confused. I'm just wondering if it doesn't necessarily honor the merging of two schools the best that we can, since it seems to kind of align more with Napa Valley Language Academy. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, and I thought about that a lot, and I perhaps maybe that's another conversation, but perhaps that's not the best name for the elementary school at this point, right? So I mean, I'd hate for that name to overly shadow the best name for the middle school, right? Because to me, the Napa Valley Language Academy really is the K through 12 program that is now available at Napa Valley Unified School District. We just happen to have a school that's named that also.
Are you proposing another citizen advisory committee to address the?
I'm not, because I think that the nuance can be achieved through the name of the middle school. And I don't find confusion there. That's one committee member opinion. Well, we do need to move forward. So I think the list meets any of the board policy. So any of these are viable suggestions that could be recommended. We need some sort of a decider that deciding, I don't know, what is it, a rubric that we go with to make it happen? Is there too many names? Our goal is 1, we have 10.
Is there any way we can narrow it down even more? I mean, are there some that we can, just like this conversation we're having about Napa Valley Middle School Language Academy? I mean, is there a way to narrow it down even more? So that we end up with maybe...
I think one way is the issue that surfaced. United had 5 choices, 5 stars. So that means was selected in the top 3 by 5 committee members. Do we need to have the discussion around moving that choice somewhere else? Like if we are seriously concerned about the overlap with the soccer club, which is huge in the community amongst our youth and our Latinx community, and that might be one variable to deal with up front. So I know Brian brought it up, and you brought it up. Franklin suggested, like, do we want to, is that like a real concern and we should take United off the table because of that concern, I guess would be the question I would have.
I think it's a valid concern. And I would like to make the consideration for those who did vote for that to back either Unidos Language Academy or Unidos Middle School, because I think that definitely does differentiate from it being united and maybe connecting with the soccer, and I think so that's what my consideration and recommendation would be for those who did vote for the United Language Academy to consider voting for Unidos Middle School or Unidos Language Academy. And I think that both of those names actually would fit the interests that the community through the survey recommended.
If there's some sort of consensus around that, what I can do is I can move it down instead of taking it off but I'll wait a minute to see.
I agree. I think Unidos is just the same as United. And I like that it includes a Spanish word.
I agree also.
So with the 5 people that put their tagged United, would you be, I guess those 5 of you, would you be willing to kind of maybe unmute and say I'd formally move to Unidos? And I guess that would be 5 additional for Unidos if everyone who voted for United is willing, unless some people did Unidos and United. I can't remember.
I actually did.
Yeah,
So-
okay. So it is more complicated than that.
But I think I'm the only one who did.
Yeah, but we're not at a point for the ranked choice vote,
Yeah.
you know, so
Right.
5 or 6, this is not a ranking. This was
Right.
just
Right.
Right.
So I think that there is enough overlap to take it off the table. Does anybody feel strongly about keeping it? Let's remove it, please, and put it down on underneath the line. It's now no longer in consideration. Okay, well, for discussion, I voted for, or I asked for Napa Middle School. Actually, before we go there, maybe let's have a conversation about the end of the name. I mean, we're coming to a consensus about middle school language academy, leadership academy, language academy. What I don't see is any reference to dual language immersion in the name, and that is commonplace in schools that are dual language immersion. At this point, are we, and with the discussion we had, are we not considering, you know, Corazon de Valle dual language immersion middle school? Is dual language immersion off the table? We are going with either language academy or leadership academy. Is there any discussion around that point?
Well, I mean, personally, I don't think that we can put dual language immersion if not 100% of the students there are going to be receiving dual language immersion instruction, which will be the case. I think that's why we would be calling it a language academy, because all of the students would be receiving language in some form, but they wouldn't be receiving dual language instruction.
Or I would add are not
Or
products-
immersion, part
Yeah,
of the
or not-
immersion program.
Yeah, I would add and not products of a K-5 immersion program as well, right? So
Correct.
that double layer.
Right. Because there is a difference.
Absolutely.
That's clear. So DLI is not part of the official name. It's a description of the program from the committee. And is middle school a part of everything? I mean, they're all middle school. Middle school is going to be a part of the name regardless.
That's not necessarily, I think that's up for discussion, and that is a pattern, but it's not necessarily, unless other staff went away, and not necessarily predetermined.
I would echo that. Pat, wouldn't you echo that? It could be language academy or middle school. And I'll just weigh in here just again, because I think of efficiency, like putting this name in all the places we have to put it, like from a marketing perspective, from a signage perspective, from a filling out forms perspective, you know, vis-a-vis accountability, California Department of Education, that the core front end of the name plus middle school plus language academy might be too long, and that we would have to probably choose between middle school as a tail or language academy as a tail. Pat, I don't know your thoughts around that. I'm just thinking signage, you know, a marketing ad, or, you know, filling out a form. If the name's too long, there's some inefficiency in that and some limitations on that. And
No, I
people
would
say,
agree.
why did we make such a long name?
Yeah, well, it won't fit on a t-shirt, even though that didn't come in as a number one priority, but I would agree, I'm in agreement on Dr. Massetti, and I do think this might be a good opportunity to, as we have sort of narrowed the list, to look at it and think about if there's a name that, or two, that particularly resonate, or you feel you want to sort of explain a little bit about why you think that it would be a good name. This might be a good time to do that before we wrap up for the evening.
I just want to ask you that one of the pieces too, as we're marketing for the school, is just the acronym, right? You know, my student goes to PV, my student goes to NBLA. So, you know, as we're looking at the name, how are we going to shorten it, and is it going to flow? I think that's another piece that we need to consider.
Can I take one of the names off the table, since I'm the only one who voted for it and I like the other names on the list better? It's the Los Juntos Middle School.
I think you can do that.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable doing that with Silvia Mendez as well, since I'm the only one that voted for it. I did have a question about the acronym, given that the name for some of them is in Spanish, and given Maestra Riva, what you just said. I'm wondering, I know that for titles in Spanish, we only capitalize the first letter. For a school name, would like, for example, Corazón del Valle, would the V still be capitalized because it's a school name specifically? And would that count in the acronym? Which is difficult too, because in the language academy, it might be in English. So could it be like, you know, would it be Voces del Valle Language Academy? Would it just be VLA instead of VVLA? I'm unsure.
Oh my. Those are all really good, complicated.
Sorry to throw that out there. I'm a Spanish major.
And Ms. Kenzak, if your husband's there for us, wouldn't it be Corazón del, right? Del Valle, it would have an L, right? We've got an error there on the top one. Okay. Those are great questions. Were those asked by Rachel? Was that Rachel who was speaking? Yeah. I think we'd have to think about acronyms as kind of an additional layer. Not NBLA and PV happen to be acronym, but just to, like, not every school gets an acronym. We have a lot of schools in our system that don't use an acronym at all. So that's not a requirement. Alejandra brought it up. It is true for our two feeders. Happens to be that our two elementary feeders do use their acronyms a lot, but it isn't a requirement. So something to consider, but not an absolute, I guess.
I have a question about how this plays in the greater conversation. So my experience has been with Harvest Middle School, which is called HMS in all of the parent squares and every sort of correspondence. It is HMS. It is known as that school. I've also heard ACMS. Like I know that as American Canyon Middle School. What is that true for Silverado? Is that true for Redwood?
That is true for Silverado and Redwood, but I'll give you an example. This reduction to acronym caused problems with River Middle School and Redwood Middle School. So the practice was that RMS had historically meant Redwood Middle School. So then River Middle School wasn't really reduced to an acronym because it caused confusion with the RMS acronym. So it has been true for the other comprehensives that they got reduced to the acronym.
Would it be clear if we call it a language academy that it's a middle school, or would that create any confusion? Because we have Napa Valley Language Academy, and then it would be some other language academy and someone, I don't know if that would create any confusion.
I think that's why, for me, and looking at the names, having something like, if we use Unidos Middle School, then it doesn't, I think Unidos is such a powerful word. And I think, could be UMS, right? Or ULA. It's also very easy, and that fits on a t-shirt. So I think that's, because I thought about that too, but I think, even if it's just, if it does have Language Academy on it, I think it would still stand out as being the middle school, I think, just because of the name, whichever one of those names that we choose, I think it still would stand out. That's just my thought.
At this point, do we want to, so Pat, you were taking us down the path as we get close to the close of this meeting. Could you take us back there?
I was, we have some time just to, I think about if there are any particular names that sort of stand out for you, just to maybe a quick whip around of the committee, just to kind of get a sense of where everyone's at, maybe one or two names that are really standing out for you. And then we still have to make time for a public comment as well at the very end. And then we'll make sure, and then the agenda for the next meeting will be set.
Okay, so and on our agenda, we have an 8 p.m. adjournment. Is that that's a hard stop, or do we have a little bit of flexibility on that with the advisory committee meeting?
We have a little bit of flexibility around that.
No, we're fine to go a little over. That's fine.
So I guess if anyone wants to weigh in, or Chairperson Teff, if you want to call on to kind of get a sense of where everyone is at before we open for public comment.
Yeah, I would like to give people the opportunity to speak about, sort of why you like, which ones are speaking to you. And I'll go first, and hopefully the voices will follow here. I'm looking at what I understand the middle school landscape to be, which is Redwood Middle School, Silverado Middle School, American Canyon Middle School, and this new middle school language academy. That, and I've spoken about Napa Middle School Language Academy or Napa Valley Middle School Language Academy. To me, that fits because it is in the construct that already exists within our valley, and that name is something that it is easy to understand. It roots us in a place, and I don't think that we have to recognize that sort of the Napa Valley, it is a global place just because of everything around us, right? So, there's a lot of work has been done to make Napa Valley a recognized location. We just happen to live here. So that's one of the reasons I like that, is that the Napa Valley Middle School Language Academy, it's descriptive. People know exactly what it is. It's rooted here, and the bringing in Napa Valley, to me, it makes it global, where I don't know that we get that through a name like Corazon de Valle, where how is that global, and some of the others.
I'm going to chime in on this one, the former middle school principal and me. I think that just a consideration is that middle school isn't necessarily as important to stand out when we look at identifying from the student perspective, that we saw that as I looked to the priorities that came about, that language really came through as something that may be important to highlight in the name and connection, and looking at some of the options that really tie to that bilingualism, biliteracy as you go through this next step of the process, just connecting back to some of those priorities.
I appreciate that, because if we reverse the order, neither of the Napa or Napa Valley work because they go against the board policy, and that is confusing. If Napa Language Academy Middle School, Napa Valley Language Academy Middle School is confusing to me with the other school, with NVLA. So with that comment, I believe, Monica, you ask us to put Language Academy in front of middle school in the name.
I just think, considering, as a staff member, I don't want to put too much input into it, but just considering the community interests that were collected and the student interests that were collected, and connecting back to those, that looking at some of these options in light of that, around the language piece would be important as we consider priorities.
Would anybody like to really speak on any of the other names and why they really should be, a top candidate? It seems obvious to me that we're not going to land on one name this evening.
I like to chime in. I personally like, the Corazón del Valle. The more I think about just, the land where this school is going to be, given the artifacts and the documents that were shared by Director Reddy of just what took place in the land back in the 1800s with, just a lot of abuse of power and just as dishonoring people, which is a complete opposite of what dual immersion is about, right? And I think our mission and vision captures that as, it's a place where we honor languages and cultures. So when I think about Corazón del Valle, I think about two things. I think about how it's at the center of the valley, right? Because it's kind of close to Yountville, so we're right in the center. But then also we are reclaiming that land to pulsate out and influence out in the name of what dual immersion does, which is integrating the community and bringing cultures together and celebrating languages. So I think Corazón del Valle just seems like it's just reflective of what dual immersion is about. Again, just honoring languages and cultures, and we're also smack in the middle of the valley. That's my 2 cents.
I love that. I don't think I can say it so eloquently about Un Valle Unido, but I think it goes along the same lines. And I want to go back to what Franklin was saying, like, we're uniting 2 schools, we're uniting a big community, we're kind of trying to tie a lot of pieces of our community together. But I think Un Valle Unido is really standing out to me.
To piggyback on that a little bit, what stands out to me is the use of the Del Valle or Un Valle. So the heart of the valley, the voice of the valley, or United Valley, those top 3 there really stick out to me.
I think what stands out to me about Voces del Valle is specifically that, like, the students that attend that school, if that were the name, I would hope that they would leave feeling like they are the voice of the valley. We're saying that they really are that voice, and it's giving, like, it's empowering, I think, which is also, I don't know, I feel like dual immersion education is very empowering. So yeah, just that they're leaders. It also goes along with their leaders, their change makers, all of that comes with Volston.
I love this input, but just as we continue to narrow based on what I think Susie said, And the acronym factor that you've got me kind of thinking that's top of mind. I'm wondering for the third choice, this focus on Valle, right? Do we need un Valle Unido, or could we just say Valle Unido? Like, do we need the demonstrative article in front of Valle? I need my Spanish experts for the purposes of naming the school.
Who would you ask to make that determination? I mean, I think the committee could ask for research on that, right?
Yeah, I'd want to kind of look at technically in Spanish, like, because I'm just thinking, like, you know, we don't put the in front of, you know what I mean? So in any kind of school title, I'd like to kind of dig into that. Maybe Katie, you can ask your husband too for efficiency.
I did. He said un Valle Unido sounds better. And
In
it's
Spanish, right?
correct. Yeah, in Spanish, yes.
Okay. All right, sorry to disrupt our thinking there, but as we kind of zone in on Valle, I just wanted to be clear on kind of these little details as we think about refinement.
So I really would like to just talk about the Unidos Language Academy. I think to me, I think it's just very powerful. I mean, when I sort of envision sort of thinking about Unidos and what that means, I just see sort of something that is very global. I think it's a really powerful word. I think it speaks to the merging of two schools and also communities. And I think there's a way in which I think that word sort of brings sort of, I don't know, it rejuvenates like the whole process. It's like, okay, here we're all united, also brings this like bridge between all the different, you know, all the different programs. It's like, here we are, we're all together. And I think that's, you know, I also like Valle Unido. I don't know, I thought about that too when I saw Un Valle Unido. I'm like, well, why can't we just call it Valle Unido? Just like the, you know, United Valley. I'm very drawn to using the word united or unidos. So I really like, I'm very drawn to both of those. I think it brings, I don't know, there's a real power behind that word of sort of uniting communities and just the word unidos. So just wanted to voice that.
Can someone help me understand the difference between the word unido and unidos? United and united in English, they're the same, but in Spanish, they're different.
Yeah, it's that un valle is one valley, so it's singular, unido. And then unidos middle school is like several together. It's implying that there's a lot. Is that, and somebody can chime in if they think it's different, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, I think it's the plural versus the singular. I think you got it, Rachel. Rachel, what's your kind of insight on the un?
I mean, if you're thinking about it in English, it sounds like un valle unido would be like more, instead of like a valley united, it'd be more kind of like one valley united in my mind.
Yeah,
that's how I'm hearing it. And if it's valle unido, it would be like valley united or united valley. So I mean, one valley united is kind of nice sounding, but I don't know if that's redundant since we're saying united. I'm not sure. I don't know.
We'll do a little technical research on that, run it by all the experts. Okay.
I believe me, I'm no expert here, but Un Valle Unido is talking about the one valley united, but Unidos would be all the people united.
Yeah. Unidos is, I think, a little like more global, and I think Valle Unidos gets us more to a kind of a more local or parochial kind of, right? we're talking about the valley, like we're making the valley the heart of it, whereas united is broader. Because I do think we have to think about, as we present the rationale to the governance team and the community at large, like we'd want to present some of the logic, right? So it's helpful to kind of talk those distinctions out as we zero in a little bit. Do we want to zone in on the valley and think about that as kind of our local anchor, or do we let go of that and go broader with just the one word that has the spirit, that captures the spirit of something bigger than the valley? I think I'm not weighing in, I'm just saying that's just a point of discussion.
And as we move towards like 8:07, I just want to make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to weigh in with where they're being led right now, and then maybe Chairperson Tuff, we can look to some public comment.
Well, I was just going to add, mostly my comments have been said, but like Franklin and Katie, I really am drawn to Unidos because it is bringing the two schools together. And then now I think Un Valle Unido does that also. So then I'm kind of like, should it be more just the Valley or Unidos? I like Unidos because it's one word and it's simple. But then I'm also drawn to Corazón del Valle because I like that it's in the center of the valley, and I like sort of that metaphor. And I like the idea of the meaning, trying to kind of bring new light to the land there at Salvador. So that's where I'm at now with my thoughts.
Okay, well, I think we're at really a stopping point. Does anybody see any possibility of truncating this list even further in advance of our next meeting? Anybody like to recommend a suggestion be removed from the list? I think that we should move forward with public comment. Action items, we do not have a recommendation for the name at this point, so we're going to table that for our next meeting. We're in discussion. Without any further discussion, I would like to move into public comment. So now's the time. Is there any other discussion? Okay, then I'm going to call for public comment, please. This time, members of the public may address the committee regarding a matter of public interest on the agenda. No action may be taken on comments of agenda items unless specifically authorized by law. If the speaker wishes to address the committee on an item on the agenda, time will be provided. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Please raise your little hand in Zoom if you'd like to comment. Is there anybody interested in commenting?
I see no public comment at this time. Oh, actually, I do see one. Hold on a second.
Can you please facilitate the public comment?
Lorena?
Yes.
1 second. Hold on 1 second. Let me get the timer up for you.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I think I like all the names. It's gonna be really tough to pick one. But the one thing I do, or a couple of things that I do think is, if you use Language Academy, it will be really, really similar, almost like saying it comes from MBLA, like Language Academy. And I think it might cause confusion with people, but if Language Academy refers more to like it's coming from like a dual immersion school, I think it will be better if you already use a Spanish word in the name that will reflect the dual immersion or the Spanish speaking like at school or teaching at school. And I do like the first 3 names that you guys have on it, but just the Language Academy part. And also where it says Un Valle Unido, I think it will go better Valle Unido. because if someone asks, oh, which school do you go? We can say in Spanish, it sounds like, oh, she goes a un valle. Seems like she's going to a different place. But like, I think it's better taking it off un, the word un. I don't know if it makes sense, but in English it doesn't make a lot of sense, but in Spanish, I think it does. I think it would be better to just leave it Valles Unidos. And that way it's not like saying you're coming from MBLA, but you're coming from Pueblo Vista or any other school, not just one or two schools. I think we all can be like together on that. I don't know if that works. And that's it.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any more comments? Any other little hands raised?
I do not see any more public comment.
Okay, and then we need to, I'll need a motion for adjournment, but I'd also like a bit of conversation on our next steps here. So we will have a meeting 2 weeks from today. And we will get the agenda emailed out, and the primary action will be the tabled action item, which is recommendation.
Yes, that will be the thing that will be on the agenda next time when we meet. And I just want to ask the committee if there's any other additional information that you feel you need before making a decision and recommendation at the next scheduled meeting.
I would like, if there's an expertise to better understand un valle unido and valle unido.
Another thing that we brought up was El Valle Unido, the United Valley.
Yeah, I love what Senora Munoz brought up in public comment though, because a lot of the times parents will just take the front kind of part of the school like that, like they'll truncate it for themselves. And if they do, which they kind of will in the colloquial discussions in Espanol, it could get reduced to, mi hijo está asistiendo en un valle, and it will sound like a distant place somewhere else potentially. And that will happen like in the day-to-day discussion. So she really brought up a powerful point for us to think about practically in the use of the language amongst our Spanish speaking population. So I think she kind of nailed it for us there.
So clarification around the sort of those article or no, whatever that is before the core name.
I think Rachel and yes, I think Rachel and Katie's, their precision around the Spanish is absolutely correct. But I think like in the usage for the name of a school, it will get reduced to something that will then cause it to mean something else.
Okay.
She brought up a great parent perspective there. I mean, when you say those of you I know there's a lot of bilingual folks here on the screen, so, but wasn't that a great point?
It is, because I know that, because I've heard conversations with parents when they talk about harvest, they're just say, mi hija va al harvest.
Yeah.
So, it becomes like this place, and they'll know. But if you say, it's like, well, ¿cuál valle?
¿Cuál
Say el valle.
Or se fueron a otro valle, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it could get weird in the use in Spanish. So that was an excellent point from a Spanish speaking parent.
Okay, and I think that in our next meeting too, that we ought to have the opportunity to still add names to the list from the committee members for if something strikes your interest through the conversation we've had, it could be put back on the list.
To just be clear with staff, and before we close with our chair, Chief, and all the committee members, is the intention, Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings, Director Reddy, the only it'll be finalizing the discussion and action. And because I do think we just to assert kind of from the board timeline perspective, we do need to take a name to the October 14th board meeting as sort of a non-negotiable in order to meet the marketing deadlines for open enrollment. So there would be no other agenda item and the time would be dedicated solely to that, correct?
That is correct. So it will be the only thing on the agenda, and it'll include time for discussion and decision making.
Okay, with that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
All those in favor of adjourning the meeting this evening, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Good work.
8:17. Just